Hey everyone, this is Mrs. Keene. I am going to walk you through how to annotate the short story Stray using the notice and note strategies. Whether you're in Mrs. Bennett's class, Mrs. Stevens' class, or my class, we wanted you guys to get used to hearing from all of us because moving forward, you're probably going to have videos from one of the three of us, not just your specific teacher. But I want to walk you through how to annotate. This is the skill that we're going to be using quite a bit, especially when we read The Honest Truth and Lions of Little Rock. We're going to be using these strategies called notice and note. So if you have not already, please go ahead and put the two documents in a Notability. If you don't have Notability, that's okay. I want you to please screenshot each of them. So I already have notice and note into my Notability, and then I'm gonna go ahead and put this in. Whoops. At any point, if you need to pause this video and get caught up, please feel free to do that. This is one of the benefits of learning online and having videos is you can stop it, take a breather, take a break, and go back to it, okay? All right. So earlier you went through the notice and note strategies with your educator on a PowerPoint. So we have, out of all the strategies, we have 6 of them. We have contrast and contradictions, aha moments, again and again, words of the wiser, and memory moment. Now, if you forget what each of those are, feel free to again stop, go back and read over them. If you can split screen and you want to have those up, that's fine. I am just, for this purpose, I'm going to keep my passage up just so you guys have this, okay? So one of my biggest strategy when I am reading and annotating is I annotate as I go. You can definitely read the entire story first and then go back and annotate. But you can also do it this way, which is we're reading as we go. So I like to read a chunk, think about what I've read, and see if there's any of those strategies in there, okay? So, Stray, this is by Cynthia Ryland. So I'm going to go ahead and start reading it out loud, and then you're going to hear me pause, think through how to annotate, and then move on. In January, a puppy wandered onto the property of Mr. Amos Lacey and his wife, Mammy, and their daughter, Doris. Icicles hung 3 feet or more from the eaves of the houses. Snowdrifts swallowed up automobiles, and the birds were so fluffed up they looked comic. The puppy had been abandoned, and it made its way down the road toward the Lacey's small house, its ears tucked, its tails between its legs, shivering. Doris, whose school had been called off because of the snow, was out shoveling the cinder-block front steps when she spotted the pup on the road. She set down the shovel. So here's where I'm going to stop, and I'm going to make my first annotation. I'm going to do something a little bit brighter than what I was using. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the in January. Okay? I'm going to highlight in January because that is giving us part of our setting, and I'm going to highlight a couple other things. Okay? The next thing I'm going to highlight is icicles hung 3 feet or more from the eaves of houses. So again, what is that telling me? It's telling me that it is super cold. So again, we're backing up our setting. And then the next part I'm gonna do is Doris, whose school had been called off because of the snow. So again, these are all indicating the setting and what's going on. So with that, we are gonna write in the margins. Okay, I'm going to use purple, and I am going to put aha. Okay, so this is one of the strategies. An aha moment is when you're reading and suddenly a character realizes, understands, or finally figures something out. You should ask yourself how this might change. So when we think of aha moments, we think of these key moments in a story. So is it a key moment in the story where we know the setting? Absolutely. So underneath aha, I'm gonna write setting, and I'm gonna draw, I'm a big fan of arrows, and I'm gonna draw an arrow to January, okay? Because we know that it is January and it is cold. Another part of this aha is that we know that Doris's school is closed because of the snow. So down here, I'm gonna draw another arrow. You'll see if you watch my videos, I love arrows. And I am just going to write out in the margins, no school. So the weather is so bad that Doris cannot go to school at this moment, okay? So that would be an aha. We know what the setting is, it's January. We know Doris, and we can even underline her name because she is gonna be our main character, and we know that she's not going to school because the snow is so bad, okay? So now we're gonna move on. Hey, come on, she called. The puppy stopped in the road, wagging its tail timidly, trembling with shyness and cold. Doris trudged through the yard, went up the shoveled drive, and met the dog. Come on, Pooch. Where did that come from? Mrs. Lacey asked as soon as Doris put the dog down in the kitchen. Mr. Lacey was at the table cleaning his fingernails with his pocket knife. The snow was keeping him home from his job at the warehouse. So again, we have another time where they're mentioning how this snow is impacting their family. So first we know the snow is impacting Doris because she can't go to school. Now we know the snow is impacting her father because he can't go to work. So when something is being brought up over and over again, that is what we call an again and again strategy. So I'm gonna write it out here, again and again. And once we start doing this a lot, we can definitely start abbreviating. Okay, so I need to go back, I need to highlight what is the again and again. So I'm gonna highlight Mr. Lacey was at the table and he was staying home because of his job. Now, as much as we just love to highlight and write in the margins, we need to make sure that we're explaining what that again and again means. So what that means, and like I said earlier, is it's talking about how the weather, oops, I spelled weather wrong, has impacted her, I'm gonna say Doris's family. Okay, so the story keeps bringing it up because it's important, and that's what an again and again is. We know that it's important because it keeps bringing up how the weather is impacting. Before I move forward, just FYI, it is completely fine if you are copying exactly what I write down. If you are finding other things that you feel like are important, that is completely okay too. But we're using the notice and note strategies and we're writing in the margins. Okay, so you can copy or you can come up with some of your own. I don't know where it came from, he said mildly, but I know for sure where it's going. Doris hugged the puppy hard against her. She said nothing. Because the roads would be too bad for travel for many days, Mr. Lacey couldn't get out to take the puppy to the pound in the city right away. He agreed to let it sleep in the basement, while Mrs. Lacey grudgingly let Doris feed it table scraps. The woman was sensitive about throwing out food. By the looks of it, Doris figured the puppy was about 6 months old and on its way to being a big dog. She thought it might have some shepherd in it. So, I'm going to highlight where he said he agreed to let it sleep in the basement while Mrs. Doris did table scraps. And I'm going to say that this is a aha moment because Doris gets to watch the puppy. So they've said, like, nope, we're not going to keep it. But since the roads were so bad, again, talking about that again and again, Doris gets to keep the puppy for a little while. 4 days passed and the puppy did not complain. It never cried in the night or howled at the wind. It didn't tear up anything in the basement. It wouldn't even follow Doris up the basement steps unless it was invited. It was a good dog. So I'm going to stop and I am going to highlight. It did not complain. It never cried or howled. Didn't tear anything up. It wouldn't even follow her up the basement. And I'm going to highlight, it's a good dog. So when we come across something that is opposite of what we would expect, we call that contrast and contradictions. So that is another type of annotating strategy. So it's when we expect something to happen, but the opposite does. It's either in what someone says, what the actions are. So just an example with this is a puppy. How do we expect a puppy to act? Well, we kind of expect it to be super hyper, tear things up, get into some trouble. And does this dog do that? No, it doesn't. So I'm going to write contrast and contradictions right here. And I'm just going to say the puppy didn't act like a crazy puppy. And if you've never had a puppy or maybe a kitten before, you might not know this, but usually they do act a little crazy. Okay? All right, moving on. Several times Doris had opened the door in the kitchen that led to the basement, and the puppy had been there, all stretched out on the top step. Doris knew it had wanted some company, and then leaned against the door, listening to the talk in the kitchen, smelling the food, being a part of things. It always wagged its tail, eyes all sleepy when she found it there. Even after a week had gone by, Doris didn't name the dog. She knew her parents wouldn't let her keep it, that her father made so little money, any pets were out of the question, and that the pup would definitely go to the pound when the weather cleared. So I'm going to stop again, and I am going to highlight. She knew her parents wouldn't let her keep it, that her father made so little money, pets were out of the question. And I am going to label that as an aha. I'm going to label that as an aha because this explains why she can't keep it. So she explains, I can't keep the dog because my parents don't make enough money to feed the dog, which could be why they kept bringing up why the weather was impacting their family so much, why Mr. Lacey couldn't go to work and why that was such a big deal. Okay, moving on. Still, she tried talking to them about the dog at dinner one night. She's a good dog, isn't she? Doris said, hoping one of them would agree with her. Her parents glanced at each other and went on eating. She's not much trouble, Doris added. I like her. She smiled at them, but they continued to ignore her. I figure she's real smart, Doris said to her mother. I could teach her things. Mrs. Lacey just shook her head and stuffed a forkful of sweet potato in her mouth. Doris fell silent, praying weather would never clear. But on Saturday, 9 days after the dog had arrived, the sun was shining and the roads were plowed. Mr. Lacey opened up the trunk of his car and came into the house. Doris was sitting alone in the living room, hugging a pillow and rocking back and forth on the edge of a chair. She was trying not to cry, but she was not strong enough. Her face was wet and her eyes full of distress. Mrs. Lacey looked into the room from the doorway. Mama, Doris said in a small voice, please. Mrs. Lacey shook her head. You know we can't afford a dog, Doris. You try to act more grown up about this. Doris pressed her face into the pillow. Outside, she heard the trunk of the car slam shut, one of the doors open and close, the old engine cough and choke, and finally start up. Daddy, she whispered, please? She heard the car travel down the road, and though it was early afternoon, she could do nothing but go to her bed. She cried herself to sleep, and her dreams were full of searching and searching for things lost. Okay, so aha moment, because what happens? Well, they give the dog. The daddy takes the dog. So I'm going to go through and I'm going to highlight where that happens. I'm going to highlight where she heard the car travel down the road. And that was early. She could do nothing but go to bed. So I'm going to say, aha, dad takes dog to pound. Okay. And who's upset about that? I'm going to say Doris is upset. Okay, moving on. It was nearly night when she finally woke up, lying there like stone, still exhausted. She wondered if she would ever in her life have anything. She stared at the wall for a while, but she started to feel hungry, and she knew she'd have to make herself get out of bed and eat some dinner. She wanted not to go into the kitchen past the basement door. She wanted not to face her parents. All right, we have a new strategy. So we've talked about aha. We have talked about contrast and contradictions. We have talked about again and again. So we are going to introduce a new strategy to this story, and that is one called tough questions. So I'm going to highlight. She wondered if she would ever in her life have anything. So she's asking herself, am I ever going to have anything of my own? And so when we ask a tough question, we need to think about, why is this important to the story? Okay, so for a tough question is, what does this question make me wonder about? Okay, so right next to it, I'm going to write tough question. Okay, and she's asking herself, is she ever going to have something of her own? I don't know if you've ever wondered that, but sometimes we have to, am I ever going to have enough money so I can do this? Am I ever going to have enough time to go travel? So she's asking herself these tough questions. So I'm going to say wanted. She just wants something of her own. So she wants the dog to take care of. She wants to have that responsibility. And so she's asking herself, am I ever going to get that chance? Okay, starting with but. But she rose up heavily. Her parents were sitting at the table drinking coffee. They looked at her when she came in, but she kept her head down. No one spoke. Doris made herself a glass of powdered milk and drank it all down. Then she picked up a cold biscuit and started out of the room. You'd better feed that mutt before it dies of starvation, Mr. Lacey said. Doris turned around. What? I said you better feed your dog. I figure it's looking for you. Doris put her hand to her mouth. You didn't take her, she asked. Oh, I took her all right, her father answered. Worst looking place I've ever seen. 10 dogs to a cage. Smell was enough to knock you down, and they give an animal 6 days to live. Then they kill it with some kind of shot. Doris stared at her father. I wouldn't leave an ant in that place, so I brought the dog back. Okay, now we're almost done, but I'm going to highlight this right here, and I am going to write contrast and contradiction. Remember, that's when a character does or says something that is opposite of what they think will do. So what did we think Dad was going to do? We thought he was going to take the dog. So I'm going to say Doris was shocked her dad didn't leave dog at pound. Mrs. Lacey was smiling at him and shaking her head as if she would never ever understand him. Mr. Lacey sipped his coffee. Well, he said, are you going to feed it or not? And there we go. So we're going to leave, we're going to highlight that last line, and I'm going to say, aha, Doris got to keep the dog. Okay, you could be shaking your hand out thinking, Mrs. Keene, this is way too much work just to read a story. But y'all, annotating is so important. It helps us dig deeper into the story, uncover some meanings that might be inferred or implied and not explicitly stated. So I just want to go over the strategies that we used. So we used aha for those big moments. We used again and again for those moments that are repeated over and over. We used contrast and contradictions for the times when characters did something or acted a certain way that was opposite of what we expected. We had a character ask a tough question, okay, when she was just really struggling with the decision being made to give the dog away. And the only one we did not use, and I'm just going to write this down here, and this is just for our knowledge, is we did not use a memory moment. Oops, I spelled memory wrong. Okay, and the only reason why I'm writing this is just to tell you guys this. We didn't use a memory moment because she being Doris, did not have a flashback. She never went back in time to go talk about something that happened in her past. And that might happen. We might read a story and only use 2 or 3 strategies, not all 6, and that's completely fine. I hope this was helpful for you guys to see a model of the educator doing this, annotating this. If you're feeling like overwhelmed with this, if you feel like you need more practice with this, please don't worry. You are going to have a lot more practice because we're going to practice these all year long. Okay? At this point, you are going to turn in your fully annotated story. It is okay if yours looks exactly like mine. That is completely fine. It is going through the whole sequence of annotating. I hope y'all have a great day. Please move on to task number 4 in Schoology now. Bye.